Meditation has always struck me as the final boss of self-improvement activities. What better thing to work on than the mind itself? After all, the mind is the vehicle through which we interact with the world. And just like we're encouraged to stay physically healthy by doing physical exercise, meditation is our chance to keep mentally healthy by doing mental exercise. There are countless articles out there about the benefits of meditation, and I'm sure I don't need to mention them to you today. But what happens when you take your mind to the extreme, doing, say, 100 hours of meditation in 10 days? Well, this video is about exactly when I tried that on a meditation retreat known as Vipassana a few years ago. Basically, I hope to make this video the video I wish I'd watched before I did it. We're going to cover what is Vipassana, should you do a Vipassana retreat, and my experience of it, the good and the bad. So feel free to skip around if any of those sections particularly appeal to you. By the way, I know there are a million types of meditation out there. I'm not here to tell you that Vipassana is better than any other technique. To be honest, I don't know enough about other techniques to be able to say. This is just my experience of doing this retreat for 10 days. If you're new here, my name's Francis. I'm a Cambridge psychology graduate, and on this channel, I upload videos every week or so about various things to do with self-improvement and psychology. The word Vipassana is a Buddhist term which basically translates to insight. So following this, Vipassana meditation is a meditation technique where you gain insight on yourself through self-observation, which leads to greater equanimity, as in calmness under adversity, and eventually, many years down the line, liberation from suffering. Still waiting on that last bit, but I'll explain more about the exact meditation techniques used on this retreat when I talk about my experience. Also, Vipassana is going to be one of the few bits of Buddhist lingo that I use in this video, but this doesn't mean to do this retreat and use this technique you have to be a Buddhist or religious. They're both entirely non-religious practices. A retreat is possibly the purest way to practice meditation of any kind. You go to a meditation center situated in some idyllic country setting. You spend a few days there meditating, and you emerge the second coming of Christ, enlightened and liberated from all suffering. Okay, I may have been exaggerating the last bit, but the first bit is exactly what Vipassana has to offer you. You're cut off from the outside world completely for 10 days, and pretty much the only thing on the agenda is meditation. Don't think of it as a free holiday. I would describe it more as a mind gym where you go and work out really intensely for 10 days. 9 days of the retreat take place in noble silence, which means no talking, but also no eye contact, no physical touch, no gestures with others. The only exception is if you want to ask a question to the meditation teacher who always sits at the front of the hall. You can either book a 10-minute slot to see them at lunch, or you can ask them a question in the sort of Q&A section at the end of the day. But this leaves you with, at best, 23 hours, 50 minutes silence a day, which is still quite insane. The teachers don't even run the sessions directly. They basically play them off an audio recording of the original teacher called Goenka, who it's claimed has received this technique passed down in an unbroken chain since the Buddha himself 2,500 years ago. So what does the schedule look like on Vipassana? Well, at 4 a.m. you get woken up by a gong and you have 30 minutes to get ready for the day, which starts at 4:30 with meditation for 2 hours. Then at 6:30 till 8 is breakfast. All the food on the retreat is vegetarian. For breakfast, you get a selection of bread for toasting, some oatmeal, fruit, tea and coffee, pretty standard. Then from 8 till 11, it's more meditation. At 11, it's lunch. You get another vegetarian meal. I can't remember exactly what I had on my retreat, but they were all very nice meals and prepared by the volunteer servers who work there. And until 1, you essentially have free time to walk around, or if you booked an appointment to ask a question to the teacher, go and see the teacher. But at 1 p.m, you're back on it, meditating until 5 p.m. 5 till 6 is tea, which is another meal. For new students doing it for the first time, you can get a piece of fruit, but for old students coming back, you are only allowed to have tea. Then between 6 and 7, you guessed it, another meditation. And from 7 till 8:15 is a discourse, which is basically a lecture by Goenka. He introduces another element to the technique you're using and talks about obstacles you're probably encountering at this point on the retreat. So that's always very interesting. And then from 8:30 till 9, we have one last meditation before you go to bed between 9:30 and 10 and do it all again tomorrow. So that's the schedule. If you add it up, it comes to 10.5 hours meditation a day, which means after 10 days, you'll have done 100 hours of meditation. Also on Vipassana, the entire meditation center is divided in two. So men and women have their own separate accommodation, dining, walking grounds, and separate halves of the meditation hall with their own teacher. The entire Vipassana retreat is free, so all accommodation, food, teaching, all of it is free of charge. Now, I can understand on first impressions how this sounds a little sketchy, and certainly before I went, I was mildly worried I was joining a cult, but Vipassana is funded completely by people who've previously completed a course and then decided to donate. Now, I love this philosophy because it means that Vipassana can't be funded just by flashy marketing and the creating of hype around it, which could get unsuspecting new customers to pay thousands of dollars. But for people to only be able to donate after they finished a course, they must feel it was worth doing and therefore decide that it will be worth funding a student to do it in the future. So should you do a retreat? As you might imagine from the schedule, it is definitely not for the faint-hearted, but as challenging as it may sound, I think anyone is capable of doing the retreat. And I say this because when I went on the retreat, some people on it hadn't meditated at all before. But if you are considering doing it, I would say it makes it less of a jump into the deep end to at least try meditation beforehand. I used a bunch of different apps before I did the retreat. I used Headspace, Stop, Breathe and Think, which is now called MyLife Meditation, and Insight Timer. So for a few months before the retreat, I was doing about an hour of meditation a day. The longest that any individual sit lasts on the retreat is 2 hours. So I tried to be able to sit for 2 hours at home before doing the retreat without taking a break. In reality, nothing really prepares you for how intense the retreat is doing 10 hours a day. Finally, if you are on the fence about it, remember that it's not a prison. You can go home at any time you wish. A fair few people always do on these retreats for a whole number of reasons, and there is absolutely zero shame in that. So what was my experience of the retreat? Well, firstly, because Vipassana is free and it's very popular, places get booked up pretty quickly. If you go onto the website on any given day, it's likely that all the places for all the retreats that you can book have been booked. So what I did and what I recommend doing is to note down the day booking opens for the retreat you want and then set a reminder to book it on that day. For me, I think it was booking in April for a retreat in August. So you do have to plan ahead quite a bit, but it is worth it. I booked the nearest centre to me in the UK, which was in Herefordshire, but there are so many all over the world, and you can find them all in the website, which I've linked in the description. So I got there on day 0, and the first thing I had to do after signing in was to put my phone and other electronics away in a locker, which I wouldn't see until the end. And that was a very difficult goodbye. But more interestingly, you also have to put away any reading or writing materials. So at first, this seemed a bit counterintuitive to me because the environment of a meditation retreat sounds like the perfect place to read a book or take a journal about how the retreat's going. But I do understand the philosophy behind it, which is that you're there to meditate only. So reading and writing would distract you from the present moment. They don't even want you to do any exercise like running or yoga, which I thought was a step too far. The philosophy behind this is slightly different, and it's that it would be distracting to others to go outside and then see loads of people like running around or doing yoga. The only exercise you can do is walking around the grounds in the meditation center. All right, I've switched to the nighttime setup since the sun has set while I've been filming this. Anyway, my room was a shared dorm. It was shared, I think, with like 9 other people. It was good because each bed and bedside table had like a curtain around it, so you had your own private space, even though it was a big dorm. And also on day 0, you could still talk to people. I talked to people who were like me, doing it for the first time. And I think we all had a collective sense of like anticipation, of nervousness and excitement about what was to come. On the other hand, I also talked to people who had done the retreat before. Some people had done it like over 10 times. From them, I got a real aura of like calmness and serenity. Also good advice, which was that obviously everyone has a different experience and it's a good idea to not put too many expectations on what you'll get out of it. So it was helpful talking to them as well. And I was also glad to see they weren't insane. And then the retreat actually began. So we entered noble silence. Now until day 10, there would be no interacting with anyone. On the first day, you get assigned your seat in the meditation hall and you make your little meditation setup out of the pillows and blankets they provide. I think sitting on 2 cushions, or maybe just one if they're this thick. This is the meditation cushion I use at home. 2 cushions and a blanket, and you're sorted. So the first time hearing Goenka's voice on the speakers when he introduced the retreat was wild. It was a very kind and reassuring voice, but equally a little bit weird and croaky. And
Remain very alert, very attentive, very attentive, very alert.
This caught me completely off guard, and I was this close to bursting out laughing, but thankfully I didn't, and I did not ruin the retreat for 127 other people. Anyway, the first 3 days of the retreat are based around a simpler meditation technique called Anapana, because coming in from the outside world, apparently we weren't ready for the full Vipassana technique yet. Anapana is basically mindfulness. We're concentrating on our breath as it runs over this area. I don't know what this area is called, underneath your nostrils, the moustache area. So it's all about just maintaining focus on the sensations of your breath in this area and doing that for 10 hours a day. When you get distracted by your thoughts, by your monkey mind, as they call it in Buddhism, you gently and non-judgmentally return your awareness to the breath as it runs over this area. It's funny because they're such simple instructions, but because you're doing it for so long and there's such big gaps between hearing anything on the audio, every time I heard Goenka remind us to do the technique again, I was like, oh yeah, that is what I should be doing, and not thinking about literally anything else. Most of the meditations either let you meditate in the big hall with everyone or in your room. I mostly chose to meditate in the big hall because in your room you can very easily lean back in your bed as you meditate and fall asleep. So being in the big hall helped me feel held accountable. I think after a while I realized I had this idea in my head that at the start of the retreat I could achieve the most comfortable setup with my pillows and blanket. But when you're sitting in that position for 10 hours a day, that is, I feel, an impossible ideal, unless you've done a bunch of yoga, which I have not. After each sit, I was in quite a bit of pain. Aside from that, the main challenge was to find the mental strength to keep going. The most meditation I'd done in a day was 2 hours. So to do that and then know you'd have to do another 8 hours and then another 90 hours after day one, you have to summon a lot of strength, go back into the meditation hall after a break and keep going. At the end of a sit at home, I'd really look forward to just going back on my computer or back on my phone. Whereas on this retreat, you can even go back to your room to read a book. It was literally just you and your mind for 10 days. I think this is exactly why the retreat is so good, because you literally have nothing to distract yourself for the entire time, and you consistently just have to keep facing your own mind. One thing I found really interesting was the contrast when I opened my eyes midway through a sit, when I'd feel distracted or downbeat. And I just see everyone around me in the meditation hall. There were 100 people just meditating and looking like statues, so still and calm. Even though I'm sure they were all going through the same thing of being distracted by their monkey mind, it was quite something to see that many people just in silence meditating. Another contrast was how sitting in the dining hall felt during the retreat compared to day 0 when we were allowed to talk there. For breakfast and lunch, we all formed a massive queue outside the dining hall, got our food, and then ate it in silence at our tables, even if we were 4 of us sat at one table together who wanted to just eat in silence. I think at this point, on one of the first few days, I just started to think about funny memes from 2013, just because I was on a meditation retreat. Any thought like that became so much funnier in my head to me. I was, again, this close to bursting out laughing. So I had to strain every sinew in my body to not laugh. And on food, they said that keeping your stomach 3/4 full was the best for meditation. It's harder to meditate when you're just absolutely stuffed, which I can understand, but also it's quite difficult because there were only 2 meals a day. I would eat lunch every day knowing that my next meal would be the following breakfast, which was 18 hours away. Every lunch I deliberately tried to eat as much as I can so that I wouldn't go too hungry in late afternoon, evening. And I think what would be best is to maintain your stomach feeling half full, 3/4 full, would be to have meals 4 or 5 times a day, but smaller ones. But this is how they did it there. So the first 3 days is literally just this Anapana technique. And nothing about this or the entire retreat is a magical experience, I would say. It was literally just constantly thinking about something, getting distracted, bringing your focus back to the breath, the body, just finding the mental strength to keep going hour after hour. One thing I tended to do each day was to have a nap between 12 and 1, which is when people had booked appointments to see the teacher, and it was kind of free time because you couldn't actually get 8 hours sleep in the schedule that they'd given. On day 4, we got introduced to the Vipassana meditation technique itself, which is essentially just scanning your body. You're just taking the focus that you've built up over 3 days on one place in this area and applying it to each part of your body, just scanning up and down from your feet all the way to the top of your head. The same process applies as Anapana because you'll still get distracted by thoughts, maybe a little less having meditated for 3 days. When you do get distracted by thoughts, again, just bringing your focus back to the body and scanning up and down for any sensations. The leg pain of sitting cross-legged for so long, I think was a notable one for me. Essentially, it's exercising a mental muscle that you can use in the face of suffering in day-to-day life, like to acknowledge that it's there, but also that it's impermanent. It's mad approaching day 5, feeling like you've gone through so much, which you have, because you've been meditating for like 50 hours, but you're also only halfway through. So I think at that point in the middle, it feels like it's literally never going to end. Obviously it does. And just for 10 days, we're living, I guess, the life of a monk. I think day 6 was kind of the start of the true monastic life. It's introduced this thing called aditana. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Translated, it means strong determination. So strong determination sitting while you're doing Vipassana. And this means for 3 of the hours during the day, you do your Vipassana meditation, but you're not allowed to move at all. When I'm meditating normally, I think after a while, I like itch my nose or something, or maybe shuffle around where I'm sat. But in a strong determination sit, the idea is you just plow through the hour with pure determination. Like if you have an itch, you just let it go, which obviously is really hard. I think it took me like a couple of days to be able to even do it once successfully. To draw an analogy with a physical gym, these strong determination sits are like doing a 1 rep max, like testing yourself at the highest level. Just the amount of effort that you have to put in is a lot more than in a normal sit. By like day 8 or day 9, I think I started to feel a genuine difference in my demeanor, not even during the meditations themselves, but between sits and my sort of approach to thoughts that would come up in my head. I think I felt like the most at peace within myself that I ever have. It was weird because on the last few days of the retreat, Goenka in his discourses started talking about kind of wishy-washy stuff. For example, feel the awareness dump on your head and fall to your feet like a bucket of water. I experienced nothing like that. But even so, the aim of the retreat, and I think what you should take away from the retreat, is how much you've worked on your equanimity muscle, which obviously doesn't require you to experience any particular sensations at all. So in that sense, I felt very fulfilled and accomplished about doing this for 10 days straight. At this point in the retreat on day 10, you're actually allowed to talk to people again. So it had been 9 days of complete silence, and the general atmosphere on this last day with everyone being able to talk again was like super positive and chill. I found it really interesting being able to discuss with other people how they found the retreat. A Vipassana retreat is an utterly profound experience. Like I can't really describe it here in words that well, what it's like to do it, but did it change my life? Obviously got that nice clickbait title and the idyllic thumbnail. I think the changing your life comes in when for a very long time, like years, you've decided to prioritize meditation. And even if it's not the Vipassana technique, just basic mindfulness, and just committed to making that a habit. They recommend you meditate for 2 hours a day using this technique and do a retreat once a year. But in the end, I think just life happens. Starting at Cambridge was essentially the nail in the coffin for my meditation habit. Perhaps I could have fit it in, but I kind of just got swept away by university life and then never really got back into it. I think that kind of illustrates that no one retreat, even one as intense as this, will conclusively change your life forever. For me, making this video has been about telling you, the viewer, what it's like to do a 10-day meditation retreat, but also to remind myself of the benefits of meditation and why I should also go back to making it a daily habit. That is what I have to say about Vipassana. I feel like I have so many thoughts about it because it was such a long experience that I haven't even covered them all in this video. Hopefully some of it has been helpful. Do drop a like if you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week with another one.